Excellent. Yes, here we're working with the process dimension, and the key, the thing that I think I would add here is that our attention to process is what helps us to recognize how the client's problems developed, how they're showing up in other relationships, how they're showing up in our relationship now. So process, our attention to process helps us to conceptualize the client. But what a process comment does is it materializes that conceptualization into a helpful change. So a process comment isn't simply our knowledge. When we're paying attention to process, right, that's our foot on the shore, our conceptualization. And this chapter is really looking at, okay, once you have this conceptualization of the client, what do you do in session? And so, Maureen, you gave a great overview of, where is my pen? You gave a great overview for the introduction here in the conceptual overview. We're looking at chapter 9, working with process dimension. And conceptually, we've been tracking through this process of interacting with clients, beginning firstly with establishing a working alliance. This is built on empathy. We're establishing a trust. We're building a foundation so that the client actually cares what we have to say, so that it's actually meaningful in some way. So our first task is always to establish a working alliance. Once we establish that working alliance, we're seeking to identify and change the maladaptive relational patterns. We're especially trying to recognize when our clients are pulling us into problematic ways of interacting, when we feel that eliciting pull, and then we're responding differently. And that's really the core, the most important attribute of a process comment is that we are changing the way we're interacting by first making explicit the way we are interacting. What a process comment does is it makes what's implicit explicit, right? We are bringing what feels like it's in the room to the center of a dialogue. We all have experiences in conversation of talking to somebody, a friend, a boss, a coworker, and just feeling like something's just felt weird. We can walk away from a conversation and feel like, I don't really know what happened. And that's because something is happening in the process, the interpersonal process between you two. And what you're talking about might be scheduling. Right? Oh, well, I was double booked for this schedule and I shouldn't have been. Right? The content is scheduling. But the process might be something very different. The process might be, I feel like over and over again, I'm getting double booked. And Terry has gotten 3 free weekends in the last month. So the process is, I'm feeling angry with my boss for double booking me. But the content is, why did I get overbooked? And this will happen with our clients. Our clients will subtly communicate frustration, communicate a desire to be close, communicate distancing, and a process comment simply puts that on the table. So we're seeking to recognize that eliciting pull, respond differently to our clients, and in a way that helps them to recognize the cost of their defenses. For example, if I'm sitting with a client and they're being very agitated and rude, I can say something like, it feels like you're really attacking me right now. That was already happening, but what I'm doing right now is helping the client see the way you're interacting with me is doing this. It's actually driving me apart from you. We're never doing this in a abrasive or critical way. We're doing it in a tentative manner, just putting it on the table. And so we're seeking as well to, as we've been identifying maladaptive patterns, we've established our working alliance, we're identifying the maladaptive patterns in the client's relationships and with us. And then as this continues to occur, we're helping our clients to identify the core issues or concerns that bring them to treatment. We're giving them initiative, and then we're joining from where they're stepping out from. We're continuing, as these themes emerge, to note them. We're simply saying them. Clients will come in to therapy not knowing what they actually need, because clients come into therapy because the symptoms that they are experiencing. But resolution of the symptoms does not always indicate a resolution of the problem. One of the common examples I use is to think of a building. And imagine here in the building, right back, I think, John Paul's table, what happens, anybody who sits back there, what happens when it rains? What happens when you come in? Evie, what happens when it rains? It leaks through the ceiling, right? Yeah, so what's going to happen to the table over the next years as the water leaks through the ceiling? It's going to get really gross. It's going to get really warped, right? That's the symptom right there. And so we can say, hey, there's an issue in this classroom. The table is warped. And that's oftentimes what our clients will come in and tell us. Hey, there's an issue in my life. I'm feeling anxious all the time. And of course, we want to respond to that. Oh, that's like, we want to affirm that, yeah, that is a problem. But if what we do then is we just say, okay, well, let's put a bucket out. I mean, that probably is the first step, right? Well, let's get a new table. Oh, the symptoms resolve. There's a new table. But then what's going to happen? What's going to happen in that back corner? Yeah, there's going to be more water leaking. And so what's going to happen to that new table? Exactly. And so if we are treating the symptoms of our client's dysfunction, what we are doing is playing psychological whack-a-mole. Take care of the anxiety there. What's going to happen? It's going to pop up somewhere else. Take care of the anxiety there. It's going to pop up somewhere else, right? The new table is just going to get ruined. So then what if we say, oh, okay, let's go up right there and let's just put some duct tape up there. Right? That's going to work, but only for a time. But if we continue to do this process, what's going to happen to the structure of the roof? What's going to happen to the metal beams? Yeah, well, eventually it's going to cave in. What's going to happen before they cave in? It'll rust. Right? So the water that's seeping in through this hole at the top begins to corrode. So then there's a hole there, but then this wall starts to sink. Right? And that, again, is how entrenched some of our clients' problems are. It's like there's water on the ground, the wall is falling in, there's a puddle on the floor, and now the floorboards are warped. Like they come in with this chaos. And if we fix the floorboards, in a matter of months, the floorboards are going to be warped again. Right? Nothing is going to be resolved until we figure out, okay, where is the hole on the top of the roof? We say, okay, we need to fix the hole on the top of the roof. At the very least, we need to put a tarp over the hole so that water quits coming in. Then we need to assess, do we need to replace some of the beams? This is very much what therapy is like in the beginning. Our clients are coming in for this issue. My table is warped. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling depressed. But they don't understand that there's a structural relationship. And what's being manifested is the symptoms. But as Aristotle says, what we want to accomplish, what is our first in our intention is the last thing in execution. Right? The first thing that we want to do, resolve all the problems, is going to be the last thing that happens. Right? So we need to take a structural, systematic approach and see symptoms not as the problem, but symptoms are actually they are a signal. They're either a solution to a problem, right? Oh, I'm really aggressive. That's not the problem, right? The problem is that you don't believe that you are respectable. And so you have to impose respect on other people. If we treat and help you to have a sense of self-respect, the aggression will diminish, right? Or they're just simply symptoms, right? Like anxiety. And so we're taking this structural approach, and when we make process comments, what we're kind of doing is saying like, yeah, I do see that this table is warped, but I've noticed something. Every time you come in and complain about the table, it's rained last week. That's what process comments do. We are linking the symptoms that the client is experiencing to the systemic issue, to the structural issue. Oh, every time you complain about the table, I can actually hear the water dropping. Right? Every time you tell me about this feeling of aloneness, it's been after you were really excited of something that you accomplished. And so you told a bunch of people about your excitement for what you accomplished. Maybe the way you're telling people about your accomplishments is off-putting. Right? So we're helping individuals to actually reformulate their treatment plan. One of the great tasks of therapy is to change the client's mind, right? To change the client's mind about what the actual issue is. And we're not trying to prove it to them. We're simply offering it and linking it. And as we link it and we link it and we link it, our clients will come in one day and be like, dude, there's a hole in the roof. But that will only happen if we've established sufficient safety so that the client can believe that if they see how big the hole is, there's going to be someone that can support them and they themselves can identify it. Because a lot of times clients are just kind of saying like, I don't think there's a problem over there because my life is so chaotic that if there was a problem there, I wouldn't possibly have the resources to resolve it. And so there is an important part to speak to the distress about the wall falling in and the puddle on the ground and the table. But this is the perspective that we want to have. A lot of times that hole in the roof comes from developmental issues. And the issues with the walls are the way that the individual is continually interacting with other people. And as a therapist, when we reenact, we just become another problem in the room. But when we resolve, we say, hey, let's just name some of these things in a more helpful way. And so we're trying not to say, hey, you need to take care of the hole in the roof, because that's us taking ownership of the therapeutic process. And that's probably part of the reason why there's a hole in the roof is because people are saying, hey, dude, look at this, look at this, look at this. But rather, we're creating the environment of safety, and then we're simply observing and linking when these problems occur in the therapeutic relationship. As we make these process comments across different situations, themes will emerge. Our clients will begin to notice, the way we help them to kind of reformulate their treatment plan is we help them notice, oh, you felt let down by this person. Oh, you also felt let down by this person. Oh, that reminds me when you called the pharmacy and you felt let down by the pharmacy. And then that gives our clients the ability to say, wow, I really feel let down a lot by a lot of people. As we link, themes emerge. And those themes become the focus of our treatment plan. And then we identify how do those themes come up and affect the interaction between you and I? How do those problems of disappointment show up in therapy? And so then we are actively stepping in. The key is that we want to actually address conflicts in the relationship and resolve them. We listen to conflicts outside the relationship, but if we don't address the conflicts that are happening in the relationship, therapy will merely be an intellectual endeavor. And it might help, but only so far. And our clients will, at best, end up just repeatedly having to replace the table or replace the bucket and dump it out. So this chapter focuses on when we've established these themes, when we have this conceptualization, how do we intervene in the here and now through process comments? So we want to respond to the client's core conflicts in the therapeutic relationship. And this is one of the keys about therapy is this type of therapy. It's a lot different than making people feel better. It's much less about kind of patting people up after leaving the war zone and much more about stepping into the trenches with people and being in the conflict, because these individuals will experience their conflicts with you. But we have the opportunity to know that as expectable and respond in a new, more helpful manner. And so what we want to do is point out when and where the clients are employing their interpersonal strategies, help them to discern when they're helpful, when they're not, help them become more aware, Father Raymond, as you were saying, of how they're responding to themselves internally in the same problematic ways that others have responded to themselves. For example, if they've experienced hypercritical parents, coaches, teachers, they will probably be hypercritical of themselves. And we want to help clients explore why they became anxious at that particular time, what types of responses tend to elicit from the therapist and others to manage their anxiety, what are they trying to pull to take care of their anxiety, and how they also try to avoid certain interactions to escape that anxiety. And so there's 3 ways that our clients will bring their core conflicts to the relationship. Transference, eliciting responses, and the last is simply accidentally acting in the same problematic way. So unintentional reenactments. Transference, as we discussed pretty extensively in last class, is when our clients systematically distort their perceptions, right? Transference is an overgeneralization of prior painful experiences that don't actually fit the therapist. This is one of the ways that our clients bring that core conflict from out there to here and now with me and you. Eliciting responses, as we discussed, will either look like the avoidance of trying to elicit and trying to bring about a certain response from the individual in order to avoid an unwanted enactment, or trying to just avoid a certain interaction with the individual, right? There's that avoidance side, and there's the approach side also of testing. And then unwitting reenactments. This occurs in the situations, as I mentioned, I like to open up my sessions by saying, where shall we begin today? Unintentionally, that question might present the client with their core conflict of, I never know where to begin, right? Or an individual who has an obsessive and compulsive character, personality style, might say, when I say, okay, where shall we begin today? For them, they hear, do the right thing, pick the right thing, don't mess up. And so accidentally, just by happenstance, the core conflict is brought up in the therapeutic relationship. When these things happen, we make it overt. When we notice a client acting in a certain way, we bring it to the table. We make a process comment. And when we do this, we bring about 2 changes. One is that when we're making these things overt, no matter what our therapeutic intervention is, it's gonna be better. It's gonna work for the client more effectively. It's going to be more helpful. Whether we are offering a thought record to explore how a client's thoughts are erroneous and illogical, whether we are proposing a mindfulness intervention, whether we're giving advice or making a suggestion, whether we're encouraging autonomy. When the process is not right, those interventions won't mean very much. And let's think again of the example with the boss. If my boss has seemed to repeatedly snub me on the schedule in preference of another employee, they may have, in a totally separate domain, they might have some really, really helpful feedback for me. They might be able to see something, hey, John Paul, there's a way you could do your job a lot better if you made these subtle differences. But if I'm still upset because I feel like my boss is snubbing me, no matter what they say, I'm not really going to listen to it. And this is the same thing with our clients. If our clients feel controlled, if our clients feel like we are being distant, if our clients feel like we are being overly smothering, whatever intervention we do, it's not going to connect very effectively. So we want to make sure that whatever modality we use, we are addressing the process effectively, because that's going to make all of our interventions better. And then when we do that, the second thing that happens is the clients have a real experience of change, of being able to talk about things and resolve them directly, which they're able to better generalize to other relationships. And so our goal is to focus, is to sustain focusing unique responses that are more helpful than others, that corrective emotional experience. It's hard. It takes time, and this is why, as a therapist, one of the most important, valuable things that we can do is to just slow down. If we're in a rush, we're not going to be paying attention to the subtleties of interaction. If we're in a hurry to get somewhere, if we become more concerned with the destination than where we're at right now, we'll miss where we are right now. And then we'll get off our course to the destination. How you get there is where you will arrive. And if you try to get there with anxiety and pressure and forcefulness, you will arrive at a place that's filled with anxiety and pressure and forcefulness. So whatever way we are behaving and acting with our clients, it needs to be in the same spirit that would allow them to enjoy whatever destination they're trying to get to. And so our clients will reenact problems. So there's 3 examples that the book gives about how these things can come up in session. The first is the reenacting of the problem. And who can tell me about Karina in the book? Yes, Angelise.
So Karina was I think she's like a 30-year-old woman who had been struggling with like generalized anxiety disorder and panic disorder for 10 years. And it talks about how she initially started binging and like purging to manage her anxiety, which was really overwhelming. And this anxiety came about in the form of like her parents. They both immigrated to the United States. They were very highly critical and controlling and demanding of her. And so she felt responsible for their parenting methods, like their problems, and that also led to a lot of like their own conflict and like a furthering of her anxiety. And so when she kind of came to therapy, basically, anyway, so she continued to like suffer from these feelings of disappointment and anxiety. And when she sought out therapy, the therapist kind of like really became like overly invested in her like changing, and like she opened up, or the therapist opened up to Karina about like her own struggle with an eating disorder herself, and like she did provide her with like support and encouragement. But despite like that initial relationship that was like, I feel like good between them, she began to binge like pretty again, and so this caused a lot of like guilt within that relationship, and it caused her to like feel like she was letting the therapist down and like show up late to sessions, or like eventually like start not going at all. And so then the therapist felt frustrated and disappointed with Karina's behavior, and like not really taking into account that guilt and where it came from. And so despite like her attempts to seek the therapist support, like she continued to just not show up, and she like never returned to therapy. And I think that it was kind of just all leading back to the therapist like didn't really well, like just like what we're talking about, she was kind of like reenacting like that guilt that she had always experienced with her parents, and like always like feeling like criticized, and like that people were demanding so much of her, and so like unwillingly that therapist was like providing that same experience for her, and that caused her to like not have the support and everything that she needed, and kind of like talk about that relationship between them, as opposed to like her just trying to like be something for someone else that kind of like she like therapist wanted her to like was very interested in her changing without like really understanding like the root of it.
Yeah, exactly. Excellent. That's an excellent summary. The over-identification and the enmeshment between the therapist and the client. The therapist saw Karina, was like, oh my gosh, we're like the same. And of course that welled up a great feeling of warmth and tenderness and care and investment. Right? But when we over-identify with our clients, oftentimes we begin to try to work out our own problems through them. Or we come to a belief that the way they need to work out their own problems is the same way that we did. There's this guy that I like, and one of the things that he says is, don't listen to people's advice. And I think this is a strong stance on it, but he says, advice is bad. Because people give you advice, and they tell you, this is what I did. And they believe that they know why what they did helped them and worked. But most of the time, we don't know why what we did worked. We might think, oh, I woke up every morning at 5 a.m. and that was what made my life better. Maybe, right? But maybe there's some other subtle interactions there that are having a functional effect. So oftentimes, when people give advice, really what they're saying is, this is what worked for me, and so this is the way all things in the world work, and if you want to resolve your issue, you need to be like me. And that doesn't give the client autonomy to discern the relevant things in their life and make the decision not based on somebody else's pressure, but on their own belief that like, hey, this is a decision worth standing on. And so when we become over-involved with our clients, we have a tendency to feel disappointed. Karina felt like she was disappointing the therapist because she was. The therapist was disappointed in her. She felt let down because the therapist had overextended herself. And when she overextended herself, she overextended her expectations and the pressures that she put on Karina. And so it's very easy. One of the biggest ways is that we can mistakenly focus on the content. Oh, eating disorder. Oh, okay, I know this. I have personal experience. Focusing on the content rather than the process. The content of what the therapist had to say for Karina, it may have been very helpful. It could have been. But just like with a boss, if you feel like the boss is snubbing you on the schedule, no matter what feedback they have for you, whether it's even if it's very, very helpful, it's going to be rejected because it's like, hey, this person's controlling me, and I don't want any of that. And so we want to offer an empathic response, but in order to hold a secure base, we have to be boundaried. We don't want to over-polarize into enmeshment, nor do we want to be disengaged. We want to hold that middle ground. And when we notice ourselves putting a little bit of pressure on our clients, we can make a process comment. Say, hey, you know what? I realize in this last 5 minutes or so, I think I've been putting some pressure on you that's been unfair. And I realize that's actually me. That's actually a me issue, putting that pressure on you. I don't like doing that. I'm sorry that I did that. I let you down. So I want to stop doing that here and now, but I want to check in. How's the last 5 minutes been for you? What's been happening? And so what we're saying is like, hey, when we have misses in therapy, we can state them and we can correct them. Yes, John Paul.
You said in order to be a secure base,
I have no idea what I said. In order to be a secure base, we have to be boundaried, right? Because you cannot be both enmeshed and a secure base, right? Enmeshed is too close, and secure base is about encouraging autonomy. And so enmeshment does not allow autonomy, which is the very same thing that Karina experienced with her parents, right? Too close with her parents. Her parents' own expectations for success were pressured on her, right, as an extension of themselves. And so she didn't actually have the ability to decide what she wanted to do. And that's the same thing that happened with the therapist. If we're not able to be boundaried, we can't encourage client autonomy. And so our process comments help us from repeating those unwanted patterns. This is a terrible title right here. Help us to not repeat unwanted patterns. That's really long. Okay. I didn't even write that much for the chapter title, huh? One of the other things that'll happen, there's the example of the phrase is a help rejecting asker, right? Oftentimes individuals will come in for therapy and there will be a lot of yes buts, individuals who can feel depressed. Somebody's pretty much saying, hey, help me, right? And we respond to that bit by saying, okay, well, let's think a little bit about how we could help improve your sleep schedule. Yeah, but I don't think I can do that because of this. Oh, okay, let's address that. Like, what would you like to be able to say to your roommates? Yeah, but I couldn't do that because they would just get too upset. Like, oh, okay, let's check in. And it's just kind of like a help rejecting asker, right? Another saying, right? People talk about choosy beggars. People who are like, hey, can I have this? But I don't want that what you can give me. I kind of want what I want. And so this is an eliciting pull, right? Our clients are simultaneously asking for help and rejecting it at the same time. After this occurs 10 or 15 times in a half hour, how are we likely to feel?
We're going to feel like whatever I'm giving you is not satisfying you. I'm just going to stop trying.
Right, exactly. Whatever. Right? Dismissive. And indeed, how do most people in this person's life feel? Dismissive. And when this person has immense needs, most people in their life are dismissive. What will they experience emotionally? Rejection. Yeah. Sadness. Disconnection. Pain. Depression. And so when our clients act in these ways, oftentimes, and it stifles our feelings of effectiveness, when things tap into our issues, we usually respond in 3 ways. One, we'll try to work harder to please our clients. 2, will withdraw and disengage. And 3, unfortunately, we can become punitive. And one of the subtle ways this punitiveness can come out a lot is, oh, they're just not ready to change. They don't want it bad enough. They're not really ready for therapy yet, right? They don't really want to be here. They're just not willing to do the work that mental health takes. Like they just don't want the advice, right? They're being picky, right? When our issues get tapped, we're going to respond. And what do these 3 things parallel with for us? What will be one of the largest determinants of which of these 3 ways we'll be responding in? These 3 styles, or these 3 tendencies to respond interpersonally when our own issues are tapped into. What do these 3 kind of interpersonal styles sound like? Our own interpersonal coping mechanisms. Based on what? Think about the familial and developmental factors chapter. Our attachment styles, right? Moving towards, preoccupied. Moving away, dismissive. Punitive could be dismissive or fearful, right? It could show up in different ways. But these tendencies to respond in these same ways. And so I want you to just take a minute here and think about when you experience frustrating behavior. If you were to sit there with a client, or if you're sitting with a friend, or you're at work experiencing frustration and mixed signals from somebody, what's your tendency? What's a reasonable expectation of how you would react? For me, it depends. But oftentimes, I will say, okay, I got to figure out this case better. I got to think about it. I got to really, really figure it out. Right? Or I'll kind of disengage, but in an intellectual way of like, okay, like let's just think about this. Like let's kind of look at like what are the factors here, right? But in the moment, in the session, if we respond automatically in one of these ways, we are going to begin to enact an interpersonal process that's problematic. And what process comments do is they help us to avoid stepping into those things by giving us another option. Let's talk about how we're interacting. And so I love on page 303 here, it's a great example of a process comment. Let's talk about what's going on between us right now and see if we can understand what's happening in our relationship. It might have something to do with your depression. It seems to me that you keep asking me for help, but you also keep saying yes, but. Maybe I overreact, and maybe I'm getting a little bit frustrated then and feeling like you're not allowing me to help you very much, even though you're asking for it. What do you see going on between us? You're not criticizing, you're not attacking. You're simply observing, hey, this is what it feels like is happening in the room, and this is what kind of is happening for me. I just shared what's kind of happening on my side. I'm just wondering, like, what's happening for you? And so rather than automatically acting in this way, I can vocalize and bring to consciousness, oh, I'm trying really hard to help, but then as I try, it makes me kind of want to move away because it doesn't seem to be helping you. And this doesn't seem the most helpful right now. I'm wondering what's happening on your side while these things are going on. And so how does that create a change? It's because when we offer a process comment in that way, we're offering a new and reparative way of connecting. We're doing something that's different than clients often experience people, because most of our lives are us automatically reacting. Most of our days are one thing to another thing to another thing to another thing to another thing. One internal mental reaction to another internal mental reaction to another internal reaction. Who here has ever gotten lost on Reddit or YouTube? And you started out one place and you ended up way another. I saw a lot of hands go up and then right back down. Yeah. Our minds aren't much different than that most days. We start on one thing. Oh, that's interesting. That triggers another thought. Oh, that's interesting. That triggers an anxious thought. Oh, no, I should look at that. That triggers another thought. Oh, I should look at that. Oh, look at that. And then 10 minutes later, we're like, dude, what did this guy say in class today? Like, wait, what did I just read? I don't even know. What did I just read in the past 3 pages? This is oftentimes that example of what happens when we click on one video to another video to another video. This is how our brains work on autopilot. That's why search engines, that's why YouTube is created that way, because it's tailored to our brains. And our brains like to go from one reaction to another reaction to another reaction to another reaction. And this is why it is so important that we practice mindfulness. Because we want to become aware and available. Oh, that's a reaction. Oh, okay. I don't know if I want to go down that road. All right, but that road's there. That's a lot different than 3 hours later, like, man, where have I been? Totally dissociated. And so the typical pattern for these clients is they're saying, I need help, I need help. Somebody comes in, tries to help them, right? Somebody probably really warm, maybe like Karina's therapist, like, oh, I got you. Oh, yeah, I can see that you're distressed, right? This happens especially in ministry, right? I'll help you, right? And then the need is more and is needed more and is needed more. And then there's frustration of like, okay, well, man, this person's asking more than I can give them. And then oftentimes people shift to blame. You're too demanding. You're not grateful. You're manipulative. And then the people just withdraw and distance themselves. What process comments do is they just say like, hey, I see this ship coming. Is that the ship that we want to get on together? Have you been on that journey before? That journey doesn't sound very fun to me. Let's try to do something different here. What's happening here? And so in that moment, we are living out a resolution of the client's core conflict. The very thing that's bringing the client in is happening here and now, and we are fixing it. We're resolving it. Not by telling our client, well, you need to do this, you need to change this in your life. This is the answer to your problems. By just saying like, hey, right now it's just me and you, and it feels like something unhelpful is happening between us. Can we talk about that and change the course of this road?
I actually did my notes on this part of the chapter specifically.
Excellent.
And I wrote down, it's like this process comment that you said earlier, it's kind of an invitation for like a collaboration with the therapist and the client. And it's not just like a one-way street with the therapist giving them the answers. It opens up 2 pathways for both the client and the therapist to walk them.
Exactly. Exactly. And this is very different than the experience that our clients will have most of their lives of hierarchy. Frequently in our lives, we experience somebody's up and somebody's down. Rarely in our lives do we experience somebody who has more knowledge and insight and wisdom about certain things, who wants to help us by actually also walking alongside of us, instead of trying to control us for their own gain and feeling good because they're such an effective helper. And so it gives an experience of togetherness and mutuality. And what that also does for the client is help them to see like, hey, I don't actually believe that I'm better than you. I don't believe that you're less than me, right? We're actually in this together. And so as the relationship becomes more meaningful in that way, change happens more effectively. There's greater interpersonal safety as the relationship becomes more real and the therapist and the client connect as persons. And then the client is able to say, oh, whoa, if things can be different here, maybe they can be different elsewhere. And so process is also a means to bridge other therapeutic orientations. And here, this part is a little bit more on, well, remember, the interpersonal approach is trans-theoretical. It's an integrative model. So you can be a CBT therapist and do interpersonal psychotherapy. You can be a dynamic therapist, no matter what model you gravitate towards. Or you could just be pure interpersonal. No matter what model you gravitate towards, the interpersonal model is going to support and help your practice. When, man, these titles are really long in this outline. Who can tell me about Rachel? Yes.
Rachel is a mom and a wife, and she's been in therapy for like 2 years. I think it was like for her anxiety, and she felt very incompetent as a mother. Her husband like wanted her to be in therapy because like she wasn't really taking action, and like the kids were just running over her. And so her first therapist, I forget what specific orientation.
Dynamic.
Analytical.
Mm-hmm.
And so like he would explain to her like, oh Rachel, this is what's going on. Like I think you have this personality type. I think you have this dynamic going on here. She's like, great, thanks. And then like nothing changed because he just went away. And then her husband was like looking for another option for her because nothing was happening after 2 years. And so he found this like thought therapist who was a bit more active. And so he was like, go to this guy. And she was afraid, so she went. She didn't want to lose this relationship. And this new person gave her all these like homework things to do, all these like ways to work through her problems with her kids. Yeah, there's like homework and like action-based steps, and it worked for a while. But then after like a few sessions, like things slowed down because she wasn't able to like continue the momentum because she felt like it was yeah, like she could do the things for a while, but like it wasn't actually empowering her. It was just like do this, and then that was it. It was like do these things, and that will help you. And so after a while, like I forget how it ended, but like she kind of like just like got burnt out of therapy.
Yeah. Why?
Neither of the orientations, like they were both helpful and they both identified the problem, or they helped her like with the solution, but they didn't actually focus on like the relationship she had, and it didn't focus on like the anxiety that she felt and how she interacted with like her husband. Authoritative and probably not like super demanding, but had expectations, and she just wasn't meeting them because she felt incompetent. And so the therapies didn't address her incompetency. They just addressed what you should do or explain. This is what you're experiencing.
And when you just tell somebody what to do or explain what they're experiencing, are you increasing or decreasing their incompetence or their sense of incompetence? Decreasing, right? Both of those therapists, those two therapists, even though CBT and psychodynamic are about as different as you can get, those two therapists were more similar in their actual practice than they were different. Because the therapist was doing the same thing to Rachel that Rachel's husband was and that Rachel's kids were, right? The problem was that Rachel's kids were walking all over her. Her husband did the same. Oh, stop doing that, do this now. Okay, I just have to comply. Too afraid of your anger. And then both of the therapists, one was CBT, very action-oriented, giving homework. At first it felt great, super helpful, somebody this person's going to help me. But in both cases, Rachel's belief about the change was that it was something about the therapist that was going to change her. And it left autonomy and strength and personal connection outside of the picture. And so the process of those therapists was not congruent with the content. The content was, we need to empower you. We need to empower you. We need to empower you. But the process is, why aren't you empowered? You need to be empowered. Like, we need to empower you. Come on, you need to be empowered. Like, we need to empower you. Right? So the process was, you need to do what I say, which is disempowering. Even though the content was, you need to be empowered. Of course Rachel's frustrated. And of course Rachel's kids are going to keep walking all over her because her therapist is doing the same thing. What could the therapist have done differently? What would you want to do differently if you were seeing Rachel?
Identify the problem and then reach for the core of the problem, see where this anxiety is coming from and why she has this tendency to let people walk over her.
But that's what the dynamic therapist did. What would you do differently than the dynamic therapist? Or the CBT therapist?
Maybe engage in more process comments of you guys' interactions, and then that will bring her more internal to herself.
Yeah. What would you say?
I think it'd bring her just to like ask her what she thinks about the interaction that's transpiring between us. How she sees that dynamic between both of us.
Good, good. Yeah. Other thoughts? What would you say? What would you do? It's Rachel.
I think, and I'm like in like the CBT approach would be like I've noticed like I've given you these homework items, I've given you like say thought records, and like we're talking about the content of like your kids again are acting out, but I'm wondering if like what I'm giving you is just like is like I'm just telling you what to do, and it doesn't seem like you're feeling I'm trying to bring it around.
Don't worry about bringing it around.
Okay.
You don't have to change Rachel in one process comment. You can't. Rachel's really good at doing what she does.
Yeah. So like identify like, I keep giving you these things. I don't know where to finish.
Yeah, and so this is, I think, what you're falling into right here is what we fall into early on in therapy, is like our process comments have to be like a boom, boom, like finishing punch, right? Like they have to be this sequence that's like the grand finale. But it really can be as simple as like, Rachel, you seem totally burnt out. Hey, Rachel, it sounds like you're just being walked over all the time. Right? We don't need to lead our clients to their core issues, but we observe in present moment and help the client will find their own way. And so Tiber says this so well. I want to read this quote here on 308. It's an extended, but it's worth it. To enact a more egalitarian and collaborative relationship with someone like Rachel is not a simple task for therapists, however. It requires therapeutic skill, thoughtful monitoring of the process dimension. In response to her life experiences, Rachel has become accomplished at getting her therapist, her husband, her children, and others to lead, to direct, and to take responsibility for her. This is the eliciting pull. She doesn't have to feel incompetent if somebody else tells her what to do. There's an eliciting pull that she's remarkably skilled at getting other people to take the lead for her. And it's not malicious, it's not conscious, it's just happening. And it's being repeated in each of those relationships. If these therapists had encouraged her to initiate more in the session, and then focused together on exploring her reluctance to lead, Rachel's core conflict would have emerged quite overtly in the therapeutic relationship. So the reason these eliciting pulls are really effective is that nobody wants to sit with Rachel in her core conflict. More than that, nobody wants to feel like the cause of Rachel's core conflict. Remember, as therapists, an error that we commonly make is to take too much responsibility for causing our clients discomfort, and then to take too much responsibility for resolving it or relieving it. If the therapist had encouraged her to initiate more in the session and then focus together on exploring her reluctance to lead, Rachel's core conflict would have emerged quite overtly in the therapeutic relationship. We want to avoid that as people too. We have a tendency to want to avoid conflict. We don't want to feel like, oh no, Rachel's feeling about me the same way that she's feeling about everybody else. Rachel's feeling inadequate here. I gotta rush in, I gotta pad her confidence, I gotta boost her esteem. I can't have her walking out here feeling so miserable. And if we do that, we will just recreate what everybody else has done. There's a great saying about a butterfly in a cocoon. And when a butterfly is breaking out of the cocoon, it's an intense struggle. It's really difficult, it's really painful. And so there's a little hole at the bottom of the cocoon. And what you can do is you can take a little, paper clip, and you can say, oh my gosh, this little butterfly, it's struggling so much. I want to open up the hole. I want to give this butterfly a boost as it's coming to the world. I want to make it a little bit easier. And if you do that, if you open up the hole a little bit and let the butterfly have a little bit of an easier time coming out, it will die. Because in order for the butterfly to have the strength in its arms and legs and wings to fly, it needs to push out against the cocoon. And if you relieve the butterfly of the pain and the difficulty of opening up the cocoon, you relieve the butterfly of the opportunity to develop the necessary strength to live, to fly, to be autonomous, to be free. And so our task is to sit there with the butterfly and say, hey, this is hard. I know it's hard. I know you're doing it right now. And I'm proud of what you're doing, and I'm here with you. And I want to support you in doing it. But if we rush in to our client's eliciting pull and relieve them of their distress, then they'll just keep coming back to us because they don't have the strength to stand on their own. That is, as soon as either of the therapists invited Rachel to follow her own agenda and bring up whatever she felt was most important to talk about, encouraging her to disagree or to express any dissatisfaction she might have with the therapist, or celebrate whatever she tested or tried to act stronger, or when she acted more independent or more assertive in the therapeutic relationship, Rachel would have become anxious. At that moment, either therapist could have acted on this point of entry, and as you said, Michael, focus her inward on her anxiety, so that then they could explore together what threat or what danger was there for her to step out of her compliant, help-seeking model. Perhaps the belief that others would leave her if she wasn't always nice, pleasing, and compliant. Perhaps that she would be acting like her demanding and dominating mother, of whom she was afraid to be like. Or perhaps that she was being selfish, or that others would feel that she was acting angrily if she spoke up for herself. Our role is to support our clients in growth and to support our clients in strength. And our tendency is going to be to try to escape difficult emotions. Remember that Tiber says the greatest obstacle to you becoming an effective therapist is your own emotional difficulties, your own inability to sit with uncomfortable emotions. So again, this is why, more than anything, I encourage the practice of mindfulness in our own therapeutic process, why we have to find supervisors who can support us in that. Because it's really hard work to hold that gap. But if we can hold that gap, there's also a freedom that comes with it. Because it's actually a much better life to live believing that the people around me have a sense of responsibility and ownership for their life than to believe, oh my gosh, I as a therapist have to take care of everybody's emotional problems. And so we're encouraging our clients, teaching our clients, scaffolding, and walking through them, supporting them in a helpful way to resolve issues on their own, not just by talking about resolving their issues on their own outside of the session, but by collaboratively inviting them into the process of resolving their issues here and now in the relationship. And so we'll continue on process comments, presentations on Tuesday. We'll continue with process comments and therapists' fears and reluctance of the process dimension.